From Rose Namajunas knocking Zhang Weili out with a clean head kick in UFC 261, to Ronda Rowdy Rousey setting off the most brutal knockouts in 2015. Here are some of the craziest female knockouts in the history of the UFC. Let's start with Zhang Weili versus Rose Namajunas. Rose emerged as the new queen of the women's strawweight division in the UFC in 2021. But before that, the American mixed martial artist had won the title in 2017 too, even though she'd struggled with the pressures and tensions of being a world champion. Unlike the women's flyweight, featherweight, and bantamweight titles, the strawweight crown has constantly been changing hands, and after Namajunas won the title in 2017 and defended it the following year, she ended up losing it to Jessica Andrade only a year later. Things went south for Jessica when she was taken down by the Chinese MMA fighter, Zhang Weili, and was reigned the strawweight queen until UFC 261, where she was all set to take on Rose. Quite a few people believed that Magnum would be too powerful for the former The Ultimate Fighter contender, and that she'd easily continue her reign as the strawweight champion. However, Rose Namajunas ended up producing one of the best moments of 2021 when she caught the Chinese ace with a clean kick to the head in the inaugural round. The Thug ended the bout with a flurry of ground and pound strikes, and went on to become a two-time UFC champion. It was insane. This wasn't the first time Namajunas has showcased her elite knockout skills though. They were also on full display when she fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk in 2017. By the end of 2017, Joanna had pretty much ruled over the UFC's strawweight division with an iron fist. She'd defeated Carla Esparza for the strawweight belt in 2015, and had since then defended it successfully like 5 times. The Polish athlete used her aggressive striking skills to obliterate her opponents in the cage. Unfortunately, it seemed like she met her match when she was paired up against Rose Namajunas at UFC 217. Joanna had never been able to strike a clean one-shot KO, and when one did occur during one of her fights, she happened to be on the wrong end of it. Even though the Thug was coming off a huge win over Michelle Waterson, not many were willing to take her side before the fight between her and Joanna actually went down. Namajunas was a bit of an underdog that time, you see, but even then, her attitude was confident, and it looked like she was ready to take the belt home. Even while the two were exchanging strikes early on in the fight just to feel one another out, it looked like Rose had the Polish fighter's timing all figured out, and she sent the champion down with an early right hook. Joanna recovered though, and she got to her feet, but this time, things were different. Just a few seconds later, Rose landed a gigantic left hook, which sent the Polish fighter crashing to the canvas. A couple more follow-up shots, and the deal was sealed. Rose Namajunas had won the belt. This fight was one of the most massive upsets of 2017, and it definitely was the most memorable knockout in the history of the UFC. In one fell swoop, Rose had turned into a UFC superstar. She's not the only one who became a world-famous UFC fighter overnight though. Yes, that's right, I'm talking about Molly McCann. Before she competed in the UFC, the English mixed martial artist had 4 KO wins to her name. However, when she joined MMA's biggest promotion, she struggled to take her opponents down and relied mainly on her volume striking to win. All of her victories inside the ring came via unanimous decision, but that was until she took part in UFC London, where she was paired up with Luana Carolina. Molly began the fight in her signature style and overwhelmed the Brazilian MMA fighter with her unrelenting forward pressure all throughout the first round. By the second round, it looked like she'd slowed down a bit, but she ended that round with a thrilling takedown. When the final round came around, Luana and Molly clinched, and the Brazilian fighter used her taller frame to hold her opponent down. But as soon as Molly Meatball McCann put some distance between herself and Carolina, she unleashed a devastating spinning elbow, which put Luana to sleep pretty much instantly, and sent the loud English crowd in the audience into a frenzy. It was an amazing knockout, but not as amazing as when Holly Holm defeated Ronda Rousey at UFC 193. Ronda Rowdy Rousey is considered a trailblazer when it comes to women's mixed martial arts. She played a crucial role in paving the way for women to be allowed into the world's biggest MMA promotion, and she did so with remarkable dominance. I think it's safe to say there's no one who does it quite like Ronda Rousey. Before the UFC absorbed the Strikeforce's roster of fighters, Rowdy won and defended the bantamweight title in that promotion, and when she joined the UFC, she was awarded the 135-pound title directly upon joining, a title she went on to defend no less than 6 times. By this point, the American pro fighter had pretty much become a household name, not to mention a gigantic global megastar in the MMA world. Her 7th title defense was to take place in Melbourne, Australia, and by this time, Ronda almost had the entire world eating out of the palm of her hand. She took on up-and-coming contender Holly Holm at UFC 193 and hoped to extend her already amazing professional record, as well as her reign over the championship. At this time, Holly Holm was a huge underdog in the game, and everyone expected Ronda to absolutely end her with an easy finish. But what happened next was one of the biggest upsets in the history of the promotion. The New Mexico native used her expert striking skills to finish Rowdy in only the 2nd round of the bout. Ronda had no answer for Holly's movement, speed, and her diverse array of strikes and blows. It was like watching a bull and a matador, if I'm being honest. Holly showed everyone watching that her striking was levels above her opponent's. Only a minute into the 2nd round, Holm landed a powerful head kick that pretty much instantly ended the fight. It was unbelievable. Even though Ronda got taken down this time, she's defeated a ton of rivals with her knockouts as well. I mean, we all remember what happened in her fight with Betcha Correia, right? Before 2015, Rowdy was mostly known as an expert grappler in the bantamweight division, even though she'd had 2 technical knockout stoppages to her name over Alexis Davis and Sarah McCann. Anyway, she ended up changing the way she was perceived at UFC 190 when she defeated the Brazilian fighter Betcha Correia with an explosive knockout. Prior to this, Betcha had made the fight extremely personal by taking jabs and making comments about Ronda's family. It was clear that Ronda was out to get her, even though the fight was to take place in Betcha's hometown. When fight night finally came around, Ronda kept coming at Betcha, despite the Brazilian fighter throwing some solid punches. Just a couple of seconds later, the fight was done. The American professional fighter nailed her opponent with a flurry of left hands and a knee, which she then followed up with a right to her forehead, which sent Betcha down face first to the canvas, unconscious. This was one of the most brutal KOs in the history of the promotion, and people were immediately aware of Rousey's impeccable grappling and her world-class striking game. Anyway, that's everything on the craziest female knockouts in UFC history.